Okay, so now we want to talk briefly about developing and negotiating a honors contract with a student. It's not, we discourage you from just having something in mind and just handing it out to the students. But we'd like you to get to know the student and try to tailor it to them as much as you can, of course. Your responsibilities in this entire process is to first and foremost accept or decline based on your interest, your workload. You don't have to do it. No one should be saying you must do this. It's totally up to you. You could go into it thinking you want to and then realize that maybe this isn't the time, or maybe the one or two students I met with aren't prepared and it wouldn't be setting them up well. So we first want you to assess the situation and not just go in thinking, I'm going to do this many contracts. Most importantly, but hopefully the simplest of these, is just turning that paperwork on time. I can give you those deadlines again. They're on that honors website on our MiraCosta page. And then develop as precise as possible descriptions of assignments, meeting times, outcomes. What do you want the student to get out of this? And are you sure that does it fit the student, and is it benefiting the student as well? And then holding them responsible to those expectations that you've outlined in your syllabus. Any of you want to talk about any of your experiences? And Zach, too, I invite you to talk about, because the standalone course, we're really trying to kind of replicate it and mimic it in some ways in this contract model. So what worked for you? What didn't work for you when it came to taking an honors course or negotiating a contract? And I don't need to start with you if you need a little time.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vanessa, you have
Can I add something really quick?
Please.
I think this is something that Professor Rico might have brought up a few slides ago or something, but this is where it might be good to share the honors syllabus, like the extra part that the honors contract students will be doing kind of as soon as they express interest. Because in my experience, when professors gave us the extra syllabus ahead of time, it was really helpful to have that extra time to think about it and make sure that it worked, and maybe even provide a little bit of feedback, and then they would have time to kind of adjust it. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, to have kind of a template already, so you're making a decision, of course, but you're also making a decision. Can I handle this? Do I want to do this? So the more info you have, the earlier, the better, and then you can start that negotiation process from there.
Can I ask, since there are all these different options of how to offer honors, what have been your preferred ways of, when you've had a regular class stacked with honors or whatever, what extra work was preferred? Do you like the small projects, a bigger project? How was it?
Personally, since my goal with honors projects is that I want to eventually take them to conferences, I like the idea of every assignment somehow relating to that overall project and somehow adding to that. But that's also my own personal goal. Everyone goes into an honors contract with a different goal in mind. But since I do want to create something that I can eventually present so I can gain that valuable research and conference experience, I would prefer to just have every assignment relate to the project.
You want something specific that you can kind of have at the end of it.
Yes.
And continue to work on. Because
exactly.
As Vanessa was saying, that project on procrastination, which I saw, it was excellent, is not done yet, right?
No.
You're going to keep working on that. So, okay, wonderful. Zach?
I think communication of expectations with, on whether that be on Canvas or just having dates on the syllabus helps the students, because if they are honors students or just any student is going to be dealing with a somewhat hectic schedule, and time management, I think, and communication of expectations really works, as well as just furthering that with the office hour meetings and getting to know the student.
Yeah, like I was saying, since everybody going into an honors contract has a different goal, if it is being kind of individualized, when you're diagnosing the student, you can kind of figure out why are they taking an honors contract and what are they hoping to gain from the honors contract. I think is important to assess.
If I could add one more thing, I agree with what they were saying, and I also think it kind of depends on personality too. I've been in a contract before where we were asked to make research presentations, kind of like what Marissa was saying, and there was a student in our group who was just more introverted and she didn't feel comfortable with that, and so she was able to choose a different project with the professor. They just worked it out, and I think that's really good. It really just depends on what Marissa's saying, their goals and also their personality. So,
Yeah. And I'd like to add to this kind of this mentorship and these meetings with this smaller group of students helps this kind of diagnosis of the student. So I would communicate with Professor Sleeper through email about what I was interested in and bounce back ideas about the project, and that actually led me to come up with an entirely new idea of where I wanted to take my research.
So if I can recommend one of my best practices that I recommend, because one of the biggest kind of complaints I hear from faculty about students is that they're not measuring up to expectations, or they're drifting during the course of this semester. And usually I follow up with, did you put a point total on each meeting? So that we're going to meet 8 times, and that's worth 80 points. And so this is what we're going to be doing during that meeting. And so if a student misses it, you can say you also missed 10 points, and and you could please go to your grade. You'll notice that you missed those 10 points. I'll offer you half back if you come and do the work, because really that's what I'm trying to do, is get them back into that consistent contact with me. But I find that if you're not clear about your assignment, but also how much communication you want, face-to-face, physical, online, and what that looks like, then your contract will oftentimes go sideways. And so that's where I'm saying you just can't have a due date of do your rough draft by this date. No. You oftentimes have to be, let's have a discussion about the documents first. In my discipline, do you even understand the documents? Because what will happen is, unless you are understanding all the different steps to get to the actual writing phase, a student will miss them, then they'll miss that bigger deadline, and now you're chasing the completion of the project. Many times they'll just drop. And that's a really frustrating thing. And so I recommend frequent and consistent contact, obviously, regular and effective. Those are words that we use with honors in general and online. But again, put a point total on that meeting. Is one of the best advice that I can give you, because that'll keep the students. Students understand that relationship. They've seen it in other courses, and they know how to react upon it. This is a due date, and they'll put it into their calendars. I have to be there, or else I lose points. Because you don't want to leave it like, oh, please come by sometime this week. No. Sometime this month. No. It's not going to work. People get busy. You'll get busy. And oftentimes you don't want to miss your own deadlines. And so that's you're having a kind of an important connection here that you're trying to develop, and attentive discipline on both of your parts to a schedule is very, very important.
Thank you. Let's see. How should honors courses and contracts be different? We have, I think, the experience here to answer that question. So can I just start maybe just briefly? We're getting a little low on time. What are some noticeable differences that you've seen between honors contracts and standalone courses? And then we'll talk about what that should be.
I guess I'll just start really quick. We could go down the line. For me, I think that specifically contracts require a lot more independence, since, I mean, you still have a community because there's 5 of you or a little bit less, but it requires the students to really be on top of their work and kind of keep track of their own projects a lot, versus like, I think in a class it's easier for people to, I don't know, since everyone's doing kind of the same projects and same work, it's easier for them to rely on others for help a lot. And they can still do that a little bit in contracts, but it's pretty independent.
So something you'll want to assess when diagnosing the student: are they going to be self-motivated,
Yes.
punctual, meet deadlines?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only ever taken honors contracts, and Zach's only ever taken honors courses. So
Okay.
neither of us have taken both.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would agree with everything Vanessa said, where when you sign an honors contract, you need to have an initiative to contact your professor and to get your research done. I don't know how that would compare to the initiative that you need to have when you're in a standalone honors course. Maybe Zach. Answer.
Yeah, so from what I've observed and been able to glean, the differences is just the size of the group you would be working with the standalone. It is the smaller class size, and so it is a learning community, but there is also the dimension of the faculty mentorship. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is that the contract is just a smaller group, and it's more focused on the mentorship aspect.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to categorize that. Anything else? Questions at this point? Okay, thank you guys. Let's see what else we've got here. Diagnosing the student. So, of course, there are so many different ways to do this, and we give you a lot of latitude here as well. We've just found in assessing other people's contracts, especially when students do drop out relatively early, when or they don't finish their projects at the end. I've spoken a lot with Professor Sleeper, and he seems to have found that often what we find is that the instructor hadn't really discussed and talked to the student enough, didn't open up those lines of communication early enough and have that deeper conversation about what they want to get out of it or what their expectations are as the instructor for the student, and then it just kind of falls apart at some point. So the more mining you can do into that student's needs, interests, expectations, the better the contract we think you're creating, the more likely it will last and be beneficial to everyone involved. Do we want to go over individual questions here? Okay, I want to make sure we get through the main portion of this. Strong contracts versus weak contracts. Of course, this is something I'm going to be looking at. We're going to reiterate a lot of what we've already said, but we want to make sure you're explicit when it comes to how much time is invested with the one-on-one meetings or even smaller group meetings with your honors contracts. What did you modify and why? We don't want you just to modify so as to arbitrarily add more work. We want some kind of intentional process there, right? This is a different kind of assignment. This makes us think a little bit more deeply about the subject. We go back to primary sources instead of reading secondary sources. There's all sorts of ways to kind of add rigor and without just making it a 15-page paper at the end. We actually discourage these long papers at the end. We'd rather see that step-by-step process that you're willing to go through with a student rather than just tell them do more work and I'll assess it at the end. It's really that experience and not just what you're coming out of this process with. Let's see.
In the best practices guide, we do have a copy of my syllabi where I do kind of explain these are the regular assignments, and you'll see 25 to 33% more, and specifically what I'm doing there. If you can use that, that's really good. You'll see also, remember, on our for faculty page of the honors website, there are a lot of syllabi there. We usually try to put Word versions of them so you can just kind of lift and paste right out into your own Word and syllabi, and so that could be something that is really good. But we do have some models here for you to be able to use. So we do have Library 201 courses, we do have history courses, we do have geology and geography courses, and so on and so forth. So be aware of those realities that we do have a lot of things that can start the process and make it a little bit easier for you. And then, as Jeff was saying, over time you'll end up tweaking it, but at least it'll give you a template to work from. And remember, you do have 4 weeks in order to kind of develop that as well.
Questions here? We're about to move on to the next section.
Is there a way to do a different grade percentage on Canvas for the honor students versus?
Yeah, I think you can make groups and have different weighted totals. I'm no expert on Canvas,
That's enough, I can work from that.
but yeah,
That's
I
fine.
It also
believe it's.
comes up as a separate section, because my person ended up,
You'll have 2 put into the same one on Canvas.
yeah,
Okay.
so then there's a separate little,
But you can do them as groups, and so yeah, Jeff is perfect there. And remember, you can also work with weights of assignments as well.
Right.
And so that's more complicated than I like to do, but it does work. And so in my experience, even this summer, it allows you to assign certain assignments to certain students, and it works perfectly. So it did work.